Hello and welcome to Britain's Hidden History with Ross, and I will be speaking to Bob Morgan, who's an amazing researcher who looks right through the details. And what he's done is go through the archives of exactly what happened when Sutton Hoo was first dug, how assumptions were reached, the political scramble that took place for control of the artifacts, and the narrative, how it's going to be presented, how for decades no one could even look at the evidence and only one person had control of everything. So it's going to be a series of short videos which I think are quite startle people. We did have the dig recently on the mainstream TV. Yeah, it touched on a few things, but not even a tiny bit. You will be amazed when you look through just how much has gone on. So the first part, I hand it over to Bob Morgan, and we're going to start right back to when the first finds were made and how things got going and how quickly assumptions started being made already. So without further ado, over to Bob Morgan.
Hi Ross. Okay,
Hi Bob.
Let's kick off and get this match going.
Right.
So what we're going to do is basically look at the archaeological excavations and quickly go through that this session. And then in next sessions, we're going to go through each of the grave goods, and we're going to look at them, look at what's been found, and look at how they've been interpreted, and the conclusions that the mainstream have made about them. And of course, you and I have some different ideas as to actually what has gone on here, which don't accord with the mainstream ones.
Yes.
And then we'll go once we've gone through the grave goods. We then look at whether it was a pagan or a Christian burial, because there's no consensus on that at the moment. Yep. And then we go to the biggie one: who is actually buried in the boat? Because again, I don't actually believe the mainstream narrative on this one.
Well, that's something we do agree on, isn't it? But
yeah,
how and why and what, so we disagree almost all the way through this. So what we're going to try and do is keep all that kind of discussion till the end and just try and Bob will give us the information so that you can make your own decisions and think about it, and then we give our views, and then maybe we'll have get people on for the last one to discuss.
Okay, yeah, and the final one we'll have a big session then where we can start teasing out conclusions and opening up for general discussion and listening to other people's ideas and views on it.
That's right.
So right, let's go forward then. First thing is, where is Sutton Hoo? It's in East Anglia in Suffolk, near Woodbridge, and as you can see there, it's not on the coast, but it's quite near the coast, and that's important again with regard to the mainstream views as to what's happened here. Then, if we look at it on a map, you can actually see that the East Anglia coast at that point has got these rivers going up it, and Sutton Hoo itself overlooks the river Deben or Devon.
Yeah, Devon is an interesting old name, isn't
Devon.
it? For starters, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting things here to look at, and we can have a discussion that went on for hours and hours. We'll try and keep it.
The last time we tried to do this.
Yeah, if looking at this map, the important things to look at is Sutton Hoo itself, where the burial boat was discovered. Rendlesham, which has become important in recent years because they found a great big Anglo-Saxon, what they term a palace, a royal residence where it's been used by the kings of East Anglia. And Snape is another important location because there was another boat burial there, which was discovered back in the late 1800s.
All right. You don't hear much about those other ones, do you?
No, you don't, because the Sutton Hoo ship has, it eclipsed them. It was so great a discovery that everything else has just been forgotten about. This is another important thing to realize as well. In a lot of for a lot of our history, the sea level was higher in those days. If you look at the coastline here, East Anglia was, as we all know, was largely underwater. You've got the great big huge extension of the Wash, which was all drained in medieval times. But if you look at the coastline here, the the thin line here represents the coastline today, and the thicker line represents the coastline as it would have been at the time of the Sutton Hoo burial. And what you can actually see is today that we just got like this river going up where Sutton Hoo is located. But at that time, it was more like a large estuary. It was much wider.
It's almost on an island, isn't it? Yeah.
And a lot easier for bigger boats to get up as far as Sutton Hoo and beyond.
Okay.
Yeah, the next thing is, here's an aerial view of the burial mounds as they are today. The Sutton Hoo boat was buried in Mound 1, which is the one I'm highlighting. But you can see all of the other burial mounds around there. You can see, if you can see my cursor, you see this interesting little track here. I'll show you what that is later. You can see these marks here. So in Mound 1 is where Sutton Hoo, the big ship burials, it was based. All these other graves, not all of them have been excavated, but a large number of them have now. And there are other graveyards discovered in and around the mounds as well. Now we get to the key characters of the story. On the right, we've got Edith Pretty. She was the owner of Tranmere House, which is where the Sutton Hoo mounds are located. She married a guy called Frank Pretty, who had died in 1934. So she was living alone in this great big huge house. And she was a bit of a spiritualist. And the reason for the graves that the mounds were excavated in the first place is often attributed to her being interested in spiritualism and seeing ghostly figures in and around the mounds. Right. She had a friend called Dorothy Cox, who I think was more inclined to see these ghostly apparitions, and it was at Dorothy Cox's urging that she sought out to excavate the mounds. And then in 1937, at, of all places, the Woodbridge Flower Fete, she had a conversation with Vincent Redstone of the Suffolk Institute of Archaeology about the possibility of excavating the burial mounds in her, basically in her garden. And that's where we come across Basil Brown.
Amazing looking character.
Yeah, this character in the middle. This guy, oh, come back. This guy is just amazing. This guy is just incredible for what he did. He's a self-taught archaeologist, and he'd been digging archaeology sites since he was 12 when he left school to work on his father's farm. So he didn't get any education. But he'd worked with the Ipswich Museum, the Suffolk Institute of Archaeology, since 1935, digging up various sites. He was self-taught, and in June to August 1938, he started excavating mounds 3, 4, and 2. He started off with 3 and 4. And he found that one of them was robbed out entirely. He found some bits and pieces in another one, but the important one was Mound 2, which, if you see my cursor, I can't see.
Yeah, the top left there. Yeah, I can see it.
The top left there, Mound 2, in which he found not a boat, but he found rivets again. But he was intelligent enough to realize that actually they were the remains of a boat, albeit there was nothing left. There was no wood, there was nothing left of the boat, but he recognized that it was a boat burial. And again, it had been basically robbed out, and there were some bits and pieces that he found. So in August 1938, after basically 3 months of excavations, he basically backfilled what he did. This is his drawings taken at that time. Again, he was meticulous at documenting what he did, which a lot of archaeologists at that point in time were very lax about. So this is his drawing for the Mound 2. thing. And as typical of their time, what the archaeologists would do, as you can see if we go up to, again, white on white. But if you can see up here, this is the mound.
Oh, yeah, top left, right, on the big round mound.
Top left, you've got the ship. And what they did in those days is that they would start on the outside of the mound and just dig a trench right into the middle, taking it down to ground level. This was on the basis that, once they go into the middle, they could find out whether there was a burial
what's in there,
in the ground, in which case that they would excavate down into it, or whether it was empty. And what he found, as I said, was the rivets of a ship and the remains of a ship. And as you can see, this is 1938 now. The ship was not visible, yet you can see that he's drawn the outline of the ship. So he knew that the ship was there. And we'll see a later photograph of this.
I know you've mentioned to me before as well, on the bottom left, the fact the ship itself is below ground level, it seems.
Well, this is the interesting one, because in the later excavations, they're saying the ship wasn't below ground level. And when I found this drawing, there is a contradiction here. And I'm inclined to believe Basil rather than the later archaeologists. His drawing is so detailed and is so clear. He's got the ground level there, and the ship is below ground level. The later excavators were of the opinion that the ship was just placed on the ground, body thrown into it, and then the earth heaped on top of it. Yeah. Okay, so then we go on to 1939, June 1939. May to June 1939, Basil starts excavating Mound 1. This is his second year now doing excavations on the site. And on this one, he initially in 1938 wouldn't dig this site because he thought it'd been robbed. You can see here quite clearly, I can find my cursor again.
Yep, the robber pit, yeah.
Well, hang on.
Back up.
Yep. You can see the robber pit in the center here. And he had noted that in 1938 and thought the pit, as a result, wasn't worth digging because he wanted to find things, and he thought it would all be robbed out. Thinking about it over the course of the winter of 1938, he'd actually worked out that the mound wasn't a round mound as it was at the point that he was in time. It had actually been a large oval mound, and over the course of the years of work on the estate, they'd cut off one end of the mound, and that was totally fortuitous because you can see what happened here. The robber pit was dug, and they think it was done in Tudor times. And you can see there, they dug down to what was ground level. And at that point, they dug what they thought was in the center of the mound, down to ground level, and there wasn't any indication that was a burial at all. Because it was an oval mound, you can actually see that the burial chamber and the boat was buried into the ground, so that it was below ground level, so they didn't hit it. And the burial chamber itself was offset because it was in the center of the oval.
What was there? Yes.
And it's very fortuitous that occurred because it all might have been robbed in Tudor times.
Yes, very close miss, and it'll be melted down into ducats or something. All right, I hope you enjoyed that. What we're going to start looking at as we go on is then how this narrative of who was buried and, well, was anyone buried, and what the treasure should look like was formed, and how the evidence was then made to conform with that. And we're going to look at the objects themselves, some of which I wasn't even aware of until Bob brought them up, like the standard with the stag on it. In fact, there's other burial mounds there, all sorts of things. So please come along, and I think you'll find a few more surprises. And until the next time, I will say peace, which is Heddle.